Hey everyone, before we begin, remember to hit the notification bell and turn on all the notifications. Also, given the topic of today's video, make sure to drop your favorite movie in the comments. Thanksgiving 1963 was a somber holiday in America. 1 week earlier, President John F. Kennedy had been brutally cut down in Dallas, plunging the nation into mourning. But in the early hours of that Thanksgiving, another tragedy was unfolding in Hollywood. Karen Kupkinette, a 22-year-old aspiring actress and daughter of a famous Chicago columnist, was living out the final moments of her life. Days later, she would be found dead in her West Hollywood apartment. The shocking death of this young starlet not only devastated her family, but soon became entangled in the web of JFK conspiracy theories. Karen Kupkinette grew up in the glow of show business. Born in 1941 to Irv and Essie Kupkinette, she was nicknamed Cookie and groomed for a life in the spotlight. Her father was a well-known Chicago newspaper columnist and TV personality, so Karen had connections that opened doors in entertainment. By her late teens, she had trained at the Actors Studio in New York and moved to Hollywood to chase her acting dreams. With her good looks and smoldering charisma, Karen showed promise. She earned rave reviews for a stage role in The Miracle Worker and was touted as an actress to watch in 1962. She landed small parts on popular TV shows like Perry Mason and The Donna Reed Show, and even a regular role on a forgettable sitcom called Mrs. G Goes to College. By all accounts, she seemed poised for stardom, or at least some level of acclaim. Behind the scenes, however, Karen's life was more turbulent. She struggled with personal insecurities, including a long battle with weight and reliance on diet pills encouraged by her image-conscious mother. In Hollywood, Karen became involved with actor Andrew Prine, whom she met while guest starring on his TV series in late 1962. The romance was intense but rocky. Karen yearned for commitment, while Prine, recently divorced, wanted to keep things casual. This mismatch led to repeated heartbreak for Karen. In mid-1963, she became pregnant and, with help from friends, terminated the pregnancy, a traumatic event that only heightened the strain between her and Prine. Desperate to hold on to the relationship, Karen began exhibiting erratic behavior. She anonymously sent threatening cut-and-paste letters to Prine and even to herself, bizarre messages made of magazine letters, in an attempt to scare her ex into paying attention. After her death, investigators discovered Karen's fingerprints on those notes, confirming she had crafted them herself. She also resorted to spying on Prine and his new girlfriend. At one point, she noted in her diary that she was watching him from behind a hedge in anguish. The emotional toll was immense, and Karen's friends observed her increasing use of substances to cope. A shoplifting arrest in 1962 hinted at her distress, and by November 1963, she seemed to be teetering on the edge. On November 27, 1963, the day before Thanksgiving, Karen's friends tried to keep her company, unaware it would be her last night alive. That evening, she joined actor Mark Goddard and his wife Marcia for dinner in Beverly Hills. Karen arrived nearly an hour late, appearing disoriented and acting strangely. Her speech slurred, her head lolling as if she were on some kind of medication. After the uneasy dinner, Karen returned to her West Hollywood apartment. Around 9:30 p.m., two more friends, writer Edward Rubin and actor Robert Hathaway, stopped by her place to watch television together. They noted nothing obviously amiss beyond Karen seeming extremely tired and worn out. By 11:15 p.m., Karen said she was going to bed, so Rubin and Hathaway let themselves out, even locking the door behind them as they left her apartment that night. Nobody heard from Karen over the next 2 days. Given her emotional state, some friends initially assumed she might just be laying low. By Saturday, November 30th, concern grew. and whispers began that she may have done something to herself. The Goddards, uneasy that Karen hadn't been in touch since their dinner, went to check on her at her small bungalow apartment near the Sunset Strip. What they found was every friend's nightmare. The door was unlocked and a foul odor hung in the air. Inside, the apartment looked ransacked. A lamp was knocked over, a bowl of cigarettes and a coffee pot lay spilled on the floor, and cushions were askew. The television was still on, but muted. On the couch lay Karen's body, motionless. She had likely been dead for about 2 days, meaning she died sometime on Thanksgiving Day, 1963. Detectives from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department arrived and noted a few flecks of blood on Karen's face and a pillow, hinting at a struggle. The puzzling scene left even her close friends in shock. Given Karen's history of depression and pill use, some wondered if this was an overdose or perhaps a tragic accident. However, the coroner's findings told a far more chilling story. During the autopsy, the medical examiner discovered Karen's hyoid bone, a small bone in the throat, was broken. This injury is a classic telltale sign of strangulation. With that evidence, Karen Kupkinet's death was officially ruled a slaying by strangling. The hunt for Karen's killer began under the glare of media attention. Here was a beautiful young actress slain in Hollywood, at the very moment the country was distracted by President Kennedy's assassination. Detectives initially pursued any lead they could find. There was no sign of forced entry at her apartment, raising the likelihood that Karen knew her attacker and had willingly let them in. The two friends who last saw her alive, Rubin and Hathaway, were questioned, and their timeline helped establish that Karen was alive late on the 27th. The focus then shifted to her tumultuous personal life for suspects. From the outset, police eyed Karen's ex-boyfriend, Andrew Prine, as a prime suspect. Prine had a clear motive in the eyes of investigators. Their relationship had ended badly. Karen had been reportedly harassing him and his new partner. Prine was in the Los Angeles area at the time, and Karen had been obsessed with him in the weeks leading up to her death. Not only that, but before her death, both Karen and Prine had reported receiving anonymous death threat letters. As mentioned earlier, the police later discovered they were fabricated by Karen herself. The revelation that she wrote those letters complicated the picture. It showed Karen's extreme desperation, but it also initially cast suspicion on Prine until the hoax was uncovered. Ultimately, though, Andrew Prine was never charged, and investigators couldn't find solid evidence tying him to the crime. He maintained his innocence, and in fact, Karen's parents eventually came to believe Prine was not responsible. Years later, the Kupkinets revealed that they harbored suspicions about another individual, though they never went public with this name. This indicates the family heard or deduced something pointing to a different culprit, but law enforcement never confirmed any alternate suspect publicly. As the investigation pressed on in 1963 and 1964, no arrest was made. Police looked into other possibilities, perhaps an enraged acquaintance, a jealous rival, or even a random intruder. The crime scene's disarray suggested a violent struggle, but some elements seemed strange. For instance, Karen's body was nude, which could imply a certain angle, yet there was little evidence reported of an indecent assault. Robbery didn't appear to be the motive either, as numerous valuable items in the apartment weren't taken. It was as if someone wanted to attack Karen personally. Her demise was the only goal. With scant physical evidence and many of Karen's closest friends cleared, the case grew cold. One reason the Karen Kupkinet case continues to fascinate is its curious timing. Karen died just 6 days after President Kennedy's assassination, leading some to wonder if there could be a connection. In the fevered atmosphere following JFK's slaying, A number of conspiracy theories sprouted, and Karen's name strangely found its way into that narrative. The most famous allegation comes from Penn Jones, a Texas newspaper editor and early JFK theorist. In his self-published 1966 book, Forgive My Grief, Jones claimed that Karen Kupkanet was the mysterious woman who tried to warn of Kennedy's assassination in advance. This claim centers on a real incident that occurred about 20 minutes before Kennedy was shot in Dallas. A telephone operator in Oxnard, California, reported that an unknown woman dialed her by mistake and whispered, "The president is going to be shot." According to the operator, the woman sounded disturbed or in a trance before the line went dead. This eerie phone call was noted by authorities, but never fully explained. Jones leapt on it and without evidence identified the woman on the phone as Karen Kupkanet. In his telling, Karen somehow knew of the assassination beforehand, perhaps through her Hollywood connections or via her father's network, and tried to alert authorities. Proponents of this idea argue that she was silenced by conspirators days later. It's a gripping story, but there is no concrete evidence to support it. Karen's friends and family have vehemently denied that she had any such foreknowledge or involvement. In fact, on November 22, 1963, Karen was reportedly not even in the Los Angeles area where the call originated. Additionally, Karen had no known connection to government or political insiders. The idea that she would be privy to one of the biggest secrets in world history is highly implausible to say the least. Nonetheless, once her name was associated with that ominous phone call, it entered the lore of JFK conspiracy literature. Well over 60 years later, the story of Karen remains a somber footnote in Hollywood history and, oddly, in Kennedy lore. A bright young Hollywood career came to an abrupt and unsettling halt when Joe Pitchler, a former child actor known for roles in the Beethoven films, vanished without a trace. Pitchler was only 18 years old when he disappeared in early 2006, leaving behind a close-knit family, a promising future, and a cryptic note. Joseph David Wolfgang Pitchler was born on February 14, 1987, in Bremerton, Washington, and began acting as a toddler. He was an outgoing child with a big personality, traits that helped him shine in auditions. He landed his first commercial by age 6, and soon scored small TV roles in shows like Lois and Clark. His breakthrough came at age 12 when he appeared in the 1999 football drama Varsity Blues, playing the younger brother of the main character. The following year, he won the role of Brennan Newton in the family comedy Beethoven's Third, a character he reprised in Beethoven's Fourth the year after. After several years of growing up in Hollywood, Pitchler's family became concerned about giving him a more normal life. In 2003, they brought Joe back home to Bremerton to finish high school and get out of the showbiz bubble. He wasn't thrilled about leaving Los Angeles. Acting was his passion, but he adjusted to ordinary teen life in Washington and stayed grounded. Joe attended Bremerton High School, graduating in 2005. He moved into his own apartment when he turned 18 and worked a regular job for a while, all while remaining close with his family and friends in town. During that time, he enjoyed normal hobbies like playing with Magic the Gathering and Pokemon cards and chilling out with his pet guinea pig. Importantly, Joe saw his return to Bremerton as temporary. He planned to head back to Los Angeles to reboot his acting career once his braces were removed in 2006. He had saved the earnings from his child acting days and was poised to make his Hollywood comeback within a few months. By early 2006, Joe appeared ready to turn his plans into reality. On the night of January 4th, 2006, Pitchler invited some friends over to his apartment. They hung out, played cards, and had some drinks, and by all accounts, Joe was in good spirits. none of his friends sensed anything amiss at the time. In the very early hours of January 5th, after the friends had left, Joe made a phone call to one of them. This was the last call ever made on his cell phone. During that brief 4:15 a.m. call, he sounded extremely upset or even tearful, though he didn't explain why. He told his friend he'd call back soon, but he never did, and that was the last time anyone heard from Joe. 4 days later, on January 9th, Joe's silver 2005 Toyota Corolla was found abandoned near an intersection in East Bremerton, just half a mile from the Port Madison Narrows waterfront. Inside the car, police discovered a handwritten note that Joe had left. In it, he expressed self-doubt and regret, writing that he wished to be a better brother to his younger sibling, and that he wanted his brother to have his belongings. The note did not explicitly say Joe planned to harm himself or run away, but its tone was troubled. Investigators interpreted it as a possible exit plan note and found that Joe left no other explanation for his sudden disappearance. When Joe's family examined his apartment, they found more worrying clues. All of his personal items, clothes, wallet, and even his asthma inhaler had been left behind, and the apartment door was unlocked with the lights still on. To his loved ones, this was completely out of character and suggested that Joe had only intended to step out briefly. From the outset, Bremerton police leaned toward the theory that Joe Pitchler did this voluntarily. His car's location near a bridge led officers to suspect he might have jumped into the water that night. However, search dogs brought to the bridge didn't pick up Joe's scent there, adding to the uncertainty of what happened. One detective even told Joe's mother that he feared her son was dead in the bay and might not be found for months. Divers were sent to search the water below, but no remains or evidence were recovered. Investigators reported finding no evidence of foul play at the scene, and Joe's sorrowful note and recent emotional state seemed to point toward the obvious explanation. Joe's family vehemently disagreed. They didn't believe Joe was in that state of mind and felt the authorities were too quick to label the case self-inflicted. According to his family and friends, Joe had been looking forward to the future, planning his return to acting, and had shown no signs of severe depression. They viewed his note as the reflective writings of an artistic teenager, not a definitive goodbye. In their eyes, something else must have happened to Joe that night, and the family insists that the note was simply saying that he wants to start a new endeavor. His mother urged the authorities to continue investigating, believing that Joe may have been abducted or met with some other form of foul play. Despite extensive searches, no trace of Joe was ever found. There were no sightings, no physical evidence beyond the car and note, and no definitive answers. As the years went by, Joe Pitchler's case went cold. Authorities maintain that the case remains open, and Bremerton police say they will still investigate any new leads that emerge. To this day, he remains listed as a missing person, and his disappearance remains unsolved. That said, detectives have made it very clear where they stand on this case. And personally, I have to agree with detectives here. I think his family just can't accept reality. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like Joe had a very realistic outlook on how his return to Hollywood was going to go. He'd been out of the acting game for years, and he was by no means a household name. I suspect he may have become depressed at the thought of never reaching those acting heights he had achieved ever again. In August 1962, Hollywood's brightest star was extinguished under mysterious circumstances. Marilyn Monroe was found lifeless in her Los Angeles home, lying face down on her bed with a telephone receiver still clutched in one hand and empty pill bottles scattered around. The world was shocked by the sudden loss of the 36-year-old icon. While police quickly concluded she had overdosed on sedatives, potentially intentionally, That tragic night soon spiraled into one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. On the evening of August 4th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe retreated to her bedroom in her Brentwood home after a day spent with close acquaintances. Earlier that Saturday, she had met with a photographer about publishing some photos and even signed for deliveries and chatted with friends. Despite recent career turmoil, she had been fired from her latest film just 2 months prior. Things were looking up. In fact, days before her death, Monroe had negotiated a new $1 million two-picture deal and was set to resume filming Something's Gotta Give the following Monday. Friends later noted that Monroe appeared to be in better spirits and looking forward to the future. As night fell, Monroe spoke on the phone with Joe DiMaggio Jr., the son of her ex-husband, Joe DiMaggio, around 7 p.m., and he sensed nothing alarming in her mood. Shortly after, she received a call from actor Peter Lawford, President John F. Kennedy's brother-in-law, inviting her to a party. Hours later, at about 3:30 a.m. on August 5th, Monroe's housekeeper, Eunice Murray, noticed the light still on in Marilyn's room and sensed something was wrong. The door was locked and Monroe didn't respond. Panicked, Murray called Monroe's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, who rushed over. Greenson had to break a window to access the bedroom, where he found Monroe unresponsive, lying unclothed under a sheet, with the telephone receiver in hand. He summoned Monroe's personal physician, Dr. Hyman Engelberg, who arrived and officially confirmed Marilyn's death at about 3:50 a.m. Police were notified by 4:25 a.m., and news of the tragedy began to spread before dawn. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office immediately launched an investigation into Marilyn Monroe's death. An autopsy was performed the same day by Deputy Coroner Thomas Noguchi, with a team of psychiatrists consulting due to Monroe's history of mental health struggles. The forensic findings were grim and seemingly conclusive. Toxicological analysis showed lethal quantities of barbiturates in Monroe's system. Several empty medicine bottles, prescriptions for these sedatives, were found at her bedside. There were no signs of external injury or foul play on her body. Investigators also noted that rigor mortis indicated she had likely died between approximately 8:30 and 10:30. On August 17, 1962, the coroner's report officially classified Marilyn Monroe's death as caused by self-inflicted acute barbiturate poisoning. The report concluded that the dosage of sedatives in her body was several times the lethal limit, far too high to be accidental, and likely ingested all at once or over a very short period. Monroe had a known history of depression, severe mood swings, and prior overdose attempts, including incidents where she had been saved at the last minute. Despite the official ruling, Monroe's death didn't put speculation to rest. In fact, it only marked the beginning of decades of questions and speculation. Marilyn's unexpected demise, at the height of her fame, fueled disbelief. As gossip swirled, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office took the unusual step of revisiting the case 20 years later. In 1982, prompted by persistent rumors of a slaying, the district attorney ordered a threshold investigation to determine if there was any credible evidence of something more. After a 3-month inquiry reviewing old and new information, the DA's office announced it found no evidence of a conspiracy to eliminate Monroe. The official conclusion remained that Marilyn Monroe died from an overdose. However, they were unable to say whether it was intentional or a tragic accident. They noted that she had a significant history of taking large quantities of substances, which suggested that she may have believed she could tolerate what she took. They also suggested that she could have been in such an altered state that she forgot what she had previously taken. Almost as soon as Marilyn was laid to rest, speculation about more sinister scenarios began to take flight. In the first couple of years after her death, however, these ideas were largely confined to whispers. The shift came in 1964 when a writer named Frank Capel self-published a sensational pamphlet titled The Strange Death of Marilyn Monroe. This is widely cited as the genesis of the Monroe conspiracies. Capel insinuated that Marilyn had been knocked off on the orders of Robert F. Kennedy, the U.S. Attorney General. According to Capel, this was because she allegedly had an affair with him and threatened to expose it. In Capel's telling, Monroe was surrounded by communist sympathizers and had become a liability to the Kennedys. He claimed Robert Kennedy enlisted Marilyn's own doctor to administer a fatal injection and silence her. Importantly, Capel's motive in 1964 may not have been truth-seeking. His pamphlet came out while Bobby Kennedy was running for Senate, suggesting it was a political smear, potentially orchestrated by opponents. Nonetheless, the lurid idea of the Kennedy clan being involved in Marilyn's demise took root in the public imagination. Throughout the 1970s and beyond, new conspiracy theories bloomed, each adding twists to the core notion that Marilyn Monroe's death wasn't the simple overdose it appeared. Many of these theories still cast the Kennedy brothers as central figures. One version posited that Marilyn kept a secret diary full of sensitive information about the Kennedys and that this made her dangerous to powerful people. One variant suggested that Monroe's death might have been an accidental overdose, but that Robert Kennedy and his brother-in-law Peter Lawford were present at her home that night. Believers in this theory point out that Robert Kennedy was in Los Angeles on the night when she perished, which is factual and well documented. The story goes that Marilyn was alive when found and could perhaps have been saved if they took action. Instead, they watched her die, like Walter does to Jesse's troublesome girlfriend in that one episode of Breaking Bad, knowing they could have saved her. And yeah, I just watched that episode about a week back. Currently working my way through the show. Great program. Not all the theories revolve around the Kennedys in such a direct manner, though they often still play a significant part. Another prominent theory emerged in the 1980s, championed by private investigators pointing the finger at the mafia. In this telling, mob boss Sam Giancana had Marilyn Monroe slain as revenge or leverage against the Kennedy brothers. The Kennedy administration was aggressively cracking down on organized crime. Giancana, who allegedly knew of Monroe's intimate ties to JFK and RFK, saw an opportunity to attack where they were vulnerable. This grisly account contends Monroe was slain on the mobsters' orders to send a message to the Kennedys. It's a theory that reads like something out of Pulp Fiction, yet it remains one of the oft-repeated conspiracy angles. Some theorists have dragged the CIA into the picture. One hypothesis suggests the feds eliminated Marilyn Monroe as payback against President Kennedy for the Bay of Pigs fiasco. Another, perhaps fanciful version, claims Monroe was snuffed out because she had learned government secrets about extraterrestrials through her Kennedy connection. Under this theory, she had threatened to go public with her knowledge of what information the American government really had on the phenomenon. When she couldn't be convinced to be quiet through conventional methods, shadowy figures within the government ended her life. Officially, the case is closed. Marilyn died of an overdose, a sad end to a life of dizzying highs and devastating lows. The real mystery is likely whether this act was intentional or not, but without knowing Marilyn's state of mind that night, it's truly impossible to know. It was a chilly November night in 1981 when Hollywood icon Natalie Wood vanished from her yacht under mysterious circumstances. The beloved film star, known for classics like West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause, had always harbored a deep fear of dark water. This was an irony not lost on anyone when she was found drowned off California's Catalina Island. Her death at age 43 and the uncertainty surrounding her final hours have fueled decades of speculation about what really happened. Over the Thanksgiving weekend of 1981, Natalie Wood set sail with her husband, Robert Wagner, on their 60-foot yacht, the Splendor, for a trip to Catalina Island. Along with them were Wood's Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken and the yacht's captain Dennis Davern. The group spent the evening drinking at a harbor restaurant on the island, where witnesses said they were heavily intoxicated. After dinner, they returned to the yacht around 10 p.m. to continue the night on board, and perhaps have a few more drinks. Tensions flared not long after. Wagner later recounted that he and Walken got into a heated argument about Wood's career. During the altercation, a distraught Wood retreated to her stateroom below deck with Wagner following behind. Around midnight, the commotion finally subsided, and when Robert went to check on Natalie, she was nowhere to be found. Natalie Wood had disappeared from the Splendor, and the yacht's small dinghy was also missing. Given Natalie's famous aversion to deep water and the fact she couldn't swim, it seemed implausible that she would take a boat out alone after midnight. Wagner later said he initially thought she might have gone ashore to cool off from the argument, but this was out of character. Realizing she was gone, Wagner and Davern searched the boat. Finding no trace of her, Davern radioed for help at around 1:30 a.m., alerting the Coast Guard. Rescuers scoured the waters through the early morning darkness. At about 5:30 a.m. on November 29th, the Splendor's dinghy was found adrift in a cove with its engine off, but Natalie wasn't on board. Shortly after, Wood's body was discovered floating in that same area, roughly a mile from the yacht. Her body showed bruises on the arms and legs and an abrasion on her cheek, and her blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit. It was a tragic end to her life, and the start of an enduring enigma that would continue on for decades. The coroner, the exact same man who had done the autopsy on Marilyn Monroe, ruled Wood's death an accidental drowning, a fact which immediately raised eyebrows. He theorized that Natalie had gone outside to secure the dinghy and then slipped on the boat's swim step, falling overboard. The bruises and scratches were attributed to her hitting the yacht or struggling to climb into the dinghy after falling. Scratch marks on the dinghy's side suggested she clung to it for a time, but her heavy jacket became soaked and weighed her down. After a few minutes in the cold water, she likely succumbed to hypothermia and drowned. All three men on the ship maintained that nothing criminal had occurred, and that Natalie's death was a tragic case of misadventure. In 1981, police saw no reason to suspect otherwise, and the investigation was closed. Many people had doubts about the official story. The notion that Natalie would deliberately venture out alone in a dinghy at night struck skeptics as highly unlikely. Years later, a nearby boater named Marilyn Wayne came forward with a chilling account of that night. She said that around 11 p.m., while moored about 40 yards from the Splendor, she heard a woman screaming that she was drowning and begging for help. According to her, the cries lasted about 15 minutes, but there was more. At one point, Wayne heard a man's slurred voice from the Splendor say that help was on the way before the screams stopped. Wayne's party allegedly tried to call Harbor Patrol, but got no response at any point, and no records of the call exist. She was never interviewed by police, and days later she says she found an anonymous note warning her to keep quiet about what she knew. Such details were not part of the initial investigation, but they fueled suspicion that more had happened than was officially acknowledged. Her report remains unverified, and it remains unclear why she waited for so long to come forward, though the threatening note has provided potential evidence as to why. In 2011, nearly 30 years after Natalie's death, The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened the case. The catalyst was Dennis Davern, who admitted he had lied to investigators in 1981. He now claimed there had been a violent altercation between Natalie and Robert before she disappeared, and alleged that Robert delayed calling for help after she went missing. His new testimony prompted the authorities to take a fresh look at the evidence to see what really happened. In 2012, the coroner's office amended Wood's death certificate, changing the cause of death from accidental drowning to, quote, drowning and other undetermined factors. This change cited the unexplained bruises on Natalie's body, which experts concluded could have been sustained before she entered the water. A 2013 coroner's report addendum went further, noting that some injuries, like a bruised forearm and a scratched knee, might be consistent with a struggle. However, detectives still lacked proof of wrongdoing. The sheriff's department didn't label Natalie's death a slaying. In 2018, additional witnesses emerged to add intrigue. A couple on another boat told investigators they saw a man and woman, presumably the couple, arguing on the Splendor's deck that night. This led authorities to publicly name Robert Wagner as a person of interest in the case. Investigators also noted that Wagner refused to be interviewed in the renewed inquiry, and that some of his statements over the years didn't align with other accounts. Still, these new claims weren't enough to bring charges in the case. The evidence remained inconclusive, with no definitive proof of foul play or of a purely accidental fall to close the case either way. By 2022, investigators reached a dead end. The sheriff's department announced that all leads were exhausted and no evidence implicated anyone. Wagner was formally cleared of wrongdoing due to lack of evidence. The case remains officially open, essentially a cold case, in case new information ever comes to light. To this day, how Natalie Wood ended up in the deep, dark water she feared so much is still unknown, though let's just say I have my suspicions. In the early hours of May 7th, 1988, a chilling sound crept through the walls of a quiet Burbank apartment building. Muffled shrieks and high-pitched moans jarred awake 23-year-old Susan Aiken, a former Miss America. She listened in alarm with her fiancé as the mysterious cries continued rhythmically for nearly an hour. Less than a week later, on Friday the 13th of May, neighbors complained of a foul odor from that same upstairs unit. Police responded and discovered the lifeless body of 29-year-old Crystal Spencer lying face down on the floor of her apartment. Crystal Spencer was an ambitious young woman with Hollywood aspirations. She grew up in a small Northern California town, and after her father passed away when she was just 8, life got a lot more difficult for her. Crystal ended up having to leave high school early to help her mom support the family. In her early 20s, she moved to Los Angeles dreaming of stardom. But like many hopeful actresses, she found only bit parts and frustration in her first years. To make ends meet, Crystal reluctantly took a job as a dancer at the Wild Goose, an adult club near Los Angeles International Airport. She wasn't happy that she was in this line of work, and Crystal never abandoned her Hollywood dreams. She landed a couple of small roles, including 2 TV commercials, and enrolled in drama and comedy workshops to hone her craft. By 1988, at 29 years old, she was still striving for that big break. In 1987, she had begun dating Anton Klein, a 37-year-old aspiring screenwriter whom she met at a garden party. For several months, Crystal hid her dancing job from him, afraid of losing his respect and that it would cause them to break up. When Anton eventually discovered her other life, he was shocked but accepted it, and the two stayed together. In early 1988, a new opportunity on the horizon gave her hope. Crystal was preparing to spend 3 months in Japan working as a nightclub hostess, a job that promised quick money and a chance to step up from the dancing scene. She confided to a friend that the idea of moving to Japan made her nervous, but she was determined to go through with it. On Wednesday, May 4th, Anton stopped by Crystal's Burbank apartment because she was homesick with what seemed like a bad cold. He brought her groceries and noted that she appeared to be in good spirits. The next night, Thursday, May 5th, would be the last time Crystal spoke with her family. Late that evening, Crystal phoned her sister, Julie, sounding distressed and claiming she had come down with a terrible flu. She wanted to know what number their mom could be reached at, since their mom was staying with friends in Los Angeles, while Crystal planned to leave for Japan. She begged Julie for their mother's phone number, desperate to reach her mom for comfort or help, but Julie thought Crystal was being dramatic and told her she didn't have it. As midnight passed into the early hours of May 6th, troubling signs continued at Crystal's apartment. Very late that night, unusual noises emanated from her unit. One neighbor later told police they had heard sounds throughout the day and into the night that sounded a lot like violent vomiting. Then came the harrowing screams that Susan Aiken and her fiancé heard in the early hours. As mentioned, due to the rhythmic style of agony they heard, they assumed that a couple were taking a walk on the wild side and didn't call the cops. This decision, not to call the cops because they didn't want to interrupt a freaky night going on upstairs, would come to haunt the couple. Meanwhile, Anton Klein was growing concerned. All through that weekend, he repeatedly tried calling Crystal, but her phone line was persistently busy. Eventually, a phone operator informed him that the line wasn't just busy. The telephone receiver in Crystal's apartment was off the hook, effectively disabling incoming calls. On Monday, May 9th, with still no word from Crystal, Anton took an extra step. He phoned the Wild Goose Club where she worked and asked the doorman if anyone had seen her. The response he got was strange and unexpected, since Anton was informed that Crystal had left for Japan. Anton was rather heartbroken that she had left without saying goodbye, but ultimately decided to reluctantly accept what he was told. On May 13th, 1988, nearly 1 week after the mysterious late-night screams, the truth of Crystal's fate was finally revealed. Neighbors, unable to ignore the awful smell seeping through the building's hallway, called the police. Officers entered Crystal Spencer's apartment and found her on the living room floor. Crystal's body had lain there for days, decomposing in the spring heat. She was found wearing only a red top, with no clothing from the waist down, and her telephone was off its hook next to her, the cord wrapped around her legs. The apartment itself was in disarray, belongings scattered about, which could have indicated a struggle or break-in, although friends noted Crystal wasn't the tidiest person to begin with. One responding officer noted immediate suspicion of a possible slaying given the state of the apartment and her body. However, with the corpse so badly decayed, it was difficult to discern much from the crime scene. Notably, there were absolutely no signs of trauma that could be conclusively identified on the remains. Further yet, investigators found no trace of substances in Crystal's system either. In the absence of clear evidence, the coroner could not determine how Crystal Spencer perished. After a thorough autopsy, the cause was officially recorded as undetermined, essentially acknowledging that the forensic experts were unable to say what ended her life. When Crystal Spencer's remains were first examined, the coroner's office registered them as a Jane Doe. Her body was so decomposed that staff had to remove her fingertips surgically just to get prints for identification. This autopsy would cause a significant degree of controversy for Crystal's family and friends. It listed a 5'7", 140-pound woman, while Crystal was barely 5 feet tall and just over 100 pounds. Anton Klein suggested that her body may have been switched out either accidentally or on purpose. However, the authorities explained that the height discrepancy was likely a clerical error, and the weight discrepancy came from not factoring in the weight of the gurney. Notably, the authorities tested her fingerprints 2 more times to ensure the proper body had been examined, which they were able to confirm. Questions also arose about the initial police investigation. Burbank police did look into Crystal's passing, but only briefly. They processed the apartment and interviewed a few people, yet within a few months the department quietly closed the case, having found no concrete evidence of foul play. Eventually, by the summer of 1988, Crystal's file was marked as a passing due to probable natural causes. This conclusion infuriated Crystal's family and Anton Klein, who believed the police had been too quick to write off the case. Anton and Crystal's family took it upon themselves to find what the police didn't. In the days after the autopsy, Crystal's relatives went through her disheveled apartment and discovered a potential clue that investigators had left behind: Crystal's camera. This camera had a roll of undeveloped film still inside, and the police had not confiscated it or even noted its existence. Anton had the film developed on his own, and the photos revealed something intriguing. It showed a middle-aged man with a mustache sitting in Crystal's apartment, smiling at the camera. This unknown man's presence raised alarm bells. Anton managed to obtain Crystal's phone records and, playing detective, matched a number to the mystery man's identity, then handed this information to the Burbank police. Detectives did track the man down and interview him, and in the end, he was ruled out as a suspect. More than 3 decades later, the death of Crystal Spencer remains an unsolved puzzle, and people still debate whether she perished from natural causes, or was the victim of a sinister plot. Over the years, several theories have emerged to explain what might have happened in that Burbank apartment in May 1988. One possibility is that Crystal did, in fact, die of a medical issue, a rapid and severe illness that struck suddenly. No definitive illness was identified in the autopsy, but not every condition leaves obvious traces. It's conceivable that severe complications from the flu or another natural cause took her life quickly. Proponents of this theory point out that no evidence of violence was found on her body, and the coroner couldn't pinpoint any injury or toxin, which might indicate a medical cause. However, the natural death hypothesis struggles to explain the haunting screams heard in the night. Some have suggested that it's unusual for someone dying of illness to make the kind of prolonged, shrill cries that were described. Further, it doesn't fully explain why she wouldn't have called an ambulance as her condition was worsening. However, those who believe this theory generally think that she did make an attempt to call 911, but only did so when it was too late. Many, including Crystal's family, strongly suspect that she met with foul play. The screams heard by multiple neighbors bolster the idea that she wasn't alone and was in severe distress. If this theory is true, the identity of the attacker remains unknown, and no direct suspects have ever been identified publicly. It could have been a stranger, perhaps a patron or stalker from the club, or someone Crystal knew casually. It could even be someone such as a boyfriend who inserted himself into the investigation consistently over the following years. But that's just speculation, of course. Notably, there were no signs of forced entry reported, but Crystal might have opened her door willingly if she recognized the visitor. Unfortunately, the delayed discovery of her body meant much of the evidence which may have existed could have vanished by the time the cops found her body. One particularly tangled theory involves a corrupt ex-cop and the criminal underworld orbiting the adult club scene. Horace McKenna was a former California Highway Patrol officer who, according to rumor, allegedly secretly owned or controlled the Wild Goose where Crystal worked. According to an LA Times report, McKenna was said to run an illegal gambling operation out of an Inglewood warehouse. In fact, a waitress friend of Crystal's later attested that Crystal had spent time at this clandestine casino, possibly rubbing shoulders with dangerous people in McKenna's circle. The theory goes that Crystal might have become an informant on McKenna's illicit activities. Notably, in favor of this theory, it turned out that the FBI had an open file on Crystal, which Anton obtained. The only problem was that the file was almost entirely redacted. According to this theory, McKenna ordered the hit and then used his significant connections within the Los Angeles Police Department to botch the investigation. However, McKenna himself was eliminated just months later, and no evidence ever tied him to Crystal's demise. Another theory branches off from Crystal's planned trip to Japan. Some have wondered if the offer to work as a nightclub hostess in Tokyo wasn't as quote-unquote innocent as it seemed. During the 1980s, there were real instances of young American women being lured abroad for hostess jobs that ended up being fronts for forced exploitation. Now, this theory really gets into wild and speculative territory. So I mentioned that there was initially some doubt about whether the body examined was Crystal's, due to some issues with mismatches in information. This theory claims that the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia, kidnapped Crystal and then shipped her to Japan or Hawaii, and then put another body in her apartment. Notably, the authorities double-checked the fingerprints on the body twice and determined that they were indeed from Crystal. Notably, there's been no connection whatsoever found between the Yakuza and Crystal. To this day, it remains entirely unclear whether Crystal was the victim of a crime or whether she simply perished due to natural causes. However, personally, I can't accept that Crystal's death was simply natural or accidental. The condition of her body, left to decompose for nearly a week, may have erased the very signs that would have revealed the truth. Advanced decomposition can obscure bruising, subtle trauma, or even evidence of strangulation if the hyoid bone wasn't broken. The fact that she was found half-clothed, the phone ripped from its base, and neighbors reported hearing what sounded like screams makes me strongly suspect foul play. Hey everyone, Jimmy here as usual with a shout out to all subscribers, YouTube members, and patrons. Also, don't forget to check out my new history video podcast, Lazy Chill History, by clicking the link in the description.